My name is Claire Madsen. I'm 32 years old. I waited 8 months to marry the love of my life. I planned every detail of that wedding: the venue, the flowers, the dress, the seating chart. I lost sleep over it. I cried over it. I saved for it for 5 years. My parents skipped my wedding. Not because of an emergency, not because of illness. They skipped it because my sister had somewhere else to be, somewhere they considered more important than the front row of their firstborn daughter's ceremony. And when I refused to rearrange my entire life around that decision, 2 chairs in the front row stayed empty. Everyone saw them. Nobody moved them. They sat there through the ceremony, through cocktail hour, through dinner, through the toasts. And on October 11th, 2025, at exactly 4:02 p.m., as I walked into that pavilion, I had 4 hours and 45 minutes left before everything my parents had done in secret would be standing on a projection screen in front of 168 people. They didn't know that yet. At 4:02 p.m., they were still in control, or at least that's what they believed. By 8:47 p.m., they wouldn't be. But let me tell you what happened first, because the ending only makes sense if you understand how we got there and how long it took me to stop believing that the people who raised me were actually on my side. A secret that had been building since August. This is what happened. If you've ever been called selfish for having a boundary, type me in the comments. This story is for you. It started the way most things do, with hope. November 9th, 2023. Harry proposed to me in Central Park, near the Bethesda Fountain, on a Saturday morning when the leaves were turning and the light was doing that thing it does in New York in fall, golden and sideways, making everything look like a painting. He'd gotten there an hour early to find the right spot. He had a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, a thin gold band with a small round diamond that she'd worn for 53 years. When he got down on one knee, a woman walking her dog stopped and started clapping. I laughed, then I said yes, then I cried. I called my parents from the cab ride home. My mother gasped and said she was so happy. My father got on the line and said Harry was a good man and they'd always known this day was coming. His voice was warm in a way it didn't always manage to be. I remember thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe getting married is the thing that finally makes them see me as someone worth celebrating. I should have recorded that call. I didn't know yet that I was going to need proof of kindness. Harry and I have been together for 4 years by the time he proposed. We met at a firm dinner. He was the senior accountant reviewing our company's books. I was the interior designer who'd spent 3 months redesigning their conference rooms and was furious about a billing discrepancy. He sorted it out in 20 minutes. I asked him if he wanted coffee. We've been together ever since. I'm a principal designer at Callaway Interiors in Greenwich, Connecticut. We do residential and commercial work. The kind of clients who have strong opinions about crown molding and will spend $40,000 on a kitchen without blinking. I've been there for 7 years. I know my job, I'm good at it, and I built that career entirely on my own. No connections from my parents, no introductions, no safety net. Just work. Harry is a senior accountant at a regional firm in Stamford, Connecticut. Methodical, precise, the kind of man who notices when numbers don't add up. That detail matters. Remember it. My parents, Frank and Lisa Matson, own 2 luxury boutiques in Greenwich, one on Greenwich Avenue, one in a shopping plaza off Round Hill Road. They've been in the business for 25 years. Nothing in their stores is priced under $400. The saleswomen know the regulars by name and know their sizes without asking. Frank and Lisa built their reputation on 2 things: taste and discretion. The right people shopped there, the wrong people didn't come back. By any measure, they were comfortable. Net worth somewhere around $3.8 million between the boutiques, their house in the backcountry, and investments. Not billionaires, but the kind of comfortable that comes with certain assumptions about how the world should work. My grandfather, Walter, my father's father, passed away in March of 2020. He was 81, had lived a full life, and he left behind a lake house in Lake George, New York, about a 4-hour drive from Greenwich. White clapboard, wraparound porch, a dock that needed replacing every few years. We'd spent summers there my whole childhood. I could tell you exactly how the light came through the kitchen window in the morning, exactly how the water smelled after rain, exactly which floorboard creaked at the top of the stairs. In his will, Grandpa Walter was specific. The Lake George property, assessed at $310,000, was left to me. Not to my father, not to be divided. To me, by name. My parents were named as co-executors of the estate. The transfer was supposed to happen within 18 months of probate clearing. By the fall of 2021, the property should have been in my name. I want to pause here because I need you to understand something. I never pushed on this. I never hired a lawyer, never demanded paperwork, never made it a fight. I trusted my parents. They were the executors. I assumed they were handling it. That's what executors do. That assumption was the most expensive mistake I ever made. My sister Anne is 26. She's been trying to become a lifestyle and fashion influencer for 4 years. At the time of my engagement, she had 89,000 followers on Instagram, Claire Ann Lux, which always bothered me more than I admitted. She posts about fashion, travel, wellness, the kind of content that makes your life look effortless. Sponsored posts for vitamin brands, travel agencies, a candle company out of Brooklyn. She'd never held a traditional job. My parents called it building her brand. They paid her rent in Hoboken, her car insurance, her phone bill. They called it an investment in her future. Growing up, the difference in how they treated us was something I learned to live with the way you learn to live with a draft in an old house. You stop noticing it directly, but you're always slightly cold. When I graduated summa cum laude from RSID in 2015, my parents took me to dinner and said they were proud. When Anne hit 50,000 followers on Instagram 2 years ago, my parents threw a party at the house with a cake and a photo booth. My father gave a toast. He said Anne was going to do something remarkable with her life. He said she had a gift. I stood there holding a glass of champagne and smiled. I was very good at smiling. But I didn't need their approval anymore. I had Harry. I had work I loved. I had a life I'd built with my own hands. Or so I believed, until the venue coordinator at Wyndham Manor called me about a booking for February 14th, 2024, and I stood in the middle of my office and felt, for the first time in years, like something was finally, undeniably mine. We signed the contract that day, October 11th, 2025. The deposit was $9,200 non-refundable. Harry and I split it from our savings. Wyndham Manor, Hudson Valley. Outdoor pavilion, mountain views, capacity for 200. The coordinator, a woman named Patricia Cole, said fall bookings went fast and we were smart to plan ahead. I texted my mother a photo of the venue that evening. She responded within 10 minutes. Claire, it's absolutely stunning. October is perfect. We can't wait to celebrate you both. I saved that text. Even then, some part of me knew to save it. July 8th, 2025. 3 months before the wedding. I was at my desk reviewing fabric samples when my phone rang, my mother. I stepped out into the hallway, pressed the phone to my ear. Her voice was careful in the way it gets when she's decided something and waiting for you to agree. She said Anne had received an invitation, a private dinner hosted by a French luxury house during Paris Fashion Week, the last week of September. A senior editor from Vogue Paris would be attending. A European fragrance brand was reportedly looking for an American ambassador with Anne's demographic reach, and this dinner was where those conversations would happen. She said it was the kind of invitation that most people in Anne's position waited their entire careers to receive. She said the timing was complicated. I already knew what was coming. I could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. "Mom," I said, "what are you asking me?" It wasn't a question. She said the family wanted to go together. My parents, a few of Anne's closest people, the whole experience properly supported. Paris for a week, maybe 10 days. The flights alone were significant. The hotel they'd found near the right bank, the wardrobe Anne would need, the preparation. She said they'd been looking at numbers and it was going to require resources they hadn't anticipated. And then she said it. She said they were wondering if Harry and I might consider moving the wedding to January. I stood very still in that hallway. There was a water stain on the ceiling I'd never noticed before. I stared at it while my mother kept talking. I told her we had signed a contract with Wyndham Manor 18 months earlier. I told her we'd sent save the dates to 186 people in April. I told her my dress had been altered twice already, that the florist contract was signed, that the photographer had blocked the entire weekend. I told her the deposit was $9,200 and non-refundable. She said she understood all of that. She said January was a beautiful time for a wedding actually, very elegant, and they'd help with whatever fees were involved in changing the date. I asked how much help. She paused. She said they'd contribute what they could. I asked what the venue would charge to move the date, assuming they even had availability in January. Patricia Cole had already told me winter weekend availability was limited. The change fees alone would run $12,000 to $15,000 minimum, and that assumed we didn't lose vendors who weren't available on the new date. My mother said she was sure we could work it out. I said no. I said the date was staying. The silence lasted 4 seconds, then her voice went somewhere colder. She said some things were more important than a date on a calendar. She said Anne's career was at a critical moment. She said Harry and I were young and healthy and could get married any time, but this window for Anne wouldn't come again. She said she hoped I'd think about it. She hung up before I could respond. 2 days later, my father called. His voice wasn't the warm voice from the engagement call. It was the store voice, the closing voice. He said I was being ungrateful. He said family meant sacrifice, and I clearly didn't understand what that word meant. He said Anne's opportunity was real and significant, and that my insistence on this specific date over my sister's future said everything about my priorities. He used the word selfish twice. I told him we had a legal contract and could not move the date without significant financial loss. He said money wasn't the point. He said respect was. Then he said something I've thought about every day since. He said if I couldn't make this small sacrifice for my family, then maybe I needed to think hard about what kind of person I was becoming. He hung up. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 35 minutes. I didn't cry. I just sat there with both hands on the wheel, staring at the concrete wall in front of me, feeling something I could only describe later as the specific loneliness of finally seeing something clearly that you'd spent years trying not to see. Harry found me when I got home. He took one look at my face and said, "Tell me everything." I did. He held me for a long time without saying anything, and then quietly he said, "I'm going to look into some things. Don't ask me yet, just let me look." I didn't know what that meant. I found out later. 3 days after my father's call, my parents demanded an in-person meeting. Harry and I drove to their house in the backcountry on a Sunday. Their home is a center hall colonial on 2.5 acres, the kind of house that takes itself seriously, with box hedges and a mahogany front door, and a kitchen that was renovated twice in the last 10 years. I grew up in that house. I know exactly where the good crystal is kept and which drawer sticks, and where my father goes when he needs to think. Anne was on speakerphone from Hoboken. I could hear espresso machine noise in the background. She wasn't going to bother with the drive. My mother sat across from us at the dining room table, hands folded. My father stood at the window with his arms crossed, which is the stance he takes when he's already decided the conversation is over. He said they had a proposal. They would cover the date change fees if Harry and I moved to January, up to $10,000. They said that was more than fair. They said they were offering to help. Harry said the venue didn't have January availability. He'd already called Patricia to check. My father said that was a logistics problem and logistics could be solved. Harry said the vendors, photographer, florist, caterer, were contracted for October 11th and most had limited winter availability. That even if we found a new date, we'd likely lose several of them and start the process over with significantly less lead time. Anne's voice came through the speakerphone. She said she couldn't believe this was even a debate. She said some things were bigger than a date. I looked at the speakerphone sitting on the center of the table. I looked at my sister's voice coming out of a device she hadn't bothered to attach a face to for this conversation, and something went very still inside me. I said, "The date stays." My father turned from the window. The meeting ended 11 minutes later. Harry and I walked to the car in silence. My mother stood in the doorway watching us go. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. For 52 days after that, my parents didn't speak to me. 52 days. I called my mother 6 times. Voicemail. I texted my father on a Sunday afternoon, just to check in, nothing about the wedding. Read at 4:32 p.m. No response. Meanwhile, Anne posted 41 Instagram stories about her preparation for Paris, packing videos, try-on hauls, a reel about her skincare routine for long flights. My parents liked every single one. My father commented on a photo of Anne's luggage spread across her living room floor. He wrote, "So proud of you, sweetheart. This is your moment." He didn't acknowledge my wedding countdown posts, not once. But that wasn't even the worst part. On September 19th, I got an email from Patricia Cole at Wyndham Manor. Subject line, "Conflicting instructions, please advise." She'd received 3 separate communications from my mother, and she wanted to clarify directly with me before taking any action. She'd attached the emails. The first was from August 7th. My mother had written to ask about options for canceling or moving the October 11th event, saying it was a family matter and she was the mother of the bride. The second was from August 29th. She'd written again, this time saying the bride was making a mistake and the family was trying to intervene for her own good, and could Patricia please advise on what could be done. The third was from September 12th, 29 days before my wedding. My mother had written, "This event should not proceed on this date. I am asking you, as the mother of the bride, to please help us stop this from happening. Please call me as soon as possible." 3 times. She tried to cancel my wedding 3 times without telling me. I forwarded the emails to Harry without any message. He called me 30 seconds later. His voice was very quiet. He said, "Claire, come home. I need to show you something, and I need you to be sitting down when I do." That night, Harry set his laptop on the kitchen table. He pulled out a folder. He'd spent 3 weeks, he told me. 3 weeks. Evenings, weekends, research tools he had access to through his firm, pulling every piece of public and documented information he could find related to my grandfather's estate. He turned the laptop toward me. The Lake George property had been listed for sale on August 3rd, listed quietly through a small regional brokerage, not widely marketed. A buyer had already been found. The sale had been moving through closing quietly, efficiently, like something designed not to be noticed. He clicked to the next document, a bank record legally obtained through estate research channels. An earnest money deposit of $95,000 had been transferred to an account registered to Ann R. Madsen on August 19th. He pulled out my grandfather's will. Page 4, Clause 7, highlighted in yellow. The Lake George property, at the time of Walter Madsen's passing, assessed at $310,000, to be transferred in full to his granddaughter, Claire Elizabeth Madsen, as her sole and separate property. My name, not my father's, not Anne's, mine. Harry closed the laptop. He looked at me. "They sold your grandfather's house," he said, "and they gave the money to Anne while they were telling you the wedding date was selfish." I looked at the folder on the table. I looked at my grandfather's name on the will. I thought about the porch at Lake George, the way the dock smelled in August, the floorboard at the top of the stairs. That's when I stopped feeling sad and started feeling something much colder. "What do we do?" I said. Harry opened another folder. He'd already started building the presentation. "I need to stop here and tell you about the people who showed up, because none of what happened next would have been possible without them. Harry first. He hadn't told me what he was doing for 3 weeks because he didn't want to show me something that might not amount to anything, didn't want to raise my hopes or my fears until he was certain. He'd spent 22 evenings at the kitchen table after dinner, cross-referencing estate records, county property filings, bank documentation, legally accessible through estate research tools his firm subscribed to. He called 2 attorneys to understand the legal framework before he touched anything. He'd built a 19-slide presentation with primary source documents embedded on every slide. He hadn't asked me to thank him. He hadn't made it about himself. He'd just done it, quietly and completely, because that's who he is. When I asked him why he put in all that time, he said something I've thought about since. He said, "Your grandfather wanted you to have something. I wasn't going to let them take that without someone noticing." That's my husband. And then there's Aunt Dorothy. Dorothy is my father's older sister, 61 years old, retired school teacher, lives in a small house in Ridgefield, Connecticut, 20 minutes from Greenwich. She never married. She has a garden and 2 cats and an opinion about everything, usually correct. She's been in my corner since I was 7 years old. She came to my college graduation when my parents left early to attend one of Anne's school recitals. She drove 4 hours to RSID and sat in the bleachers in the June heat and cheered when my name was called. Afterwards, she took me to dinner and said, "Claire, you are exactly who you're supposed to be. I want you to know that someone sees it." She called me every week during my engagement, not to talk about the wedding, just to talk. How's work? How's Harry? Are you sleeping enough? Have you eaten today? The things my mother used to ask before the date became a problem. When my father told me he wouldn't walk me down the aisle 3 weeks before the wedding over the phone as a consequence of my refusal to move the date, I called Dorothy. I didn't ask her to come, I just told her what he'd said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'll be there Saturday morning. What time do you need me at the venue?" I told her the ceremony was at 4. She said she'd be at Wyndham Manor by 9. On the morning of October 11th, I was in the bridal suite at 7:15. My dress was hanging by the window, ivory silk, lace sleeves, $3,400 that I paid for myself. My mother was supposed to help me into it. Instead, my maid of honor, Renata, zipped the back. At 9:03, there was a knock on the door. Dorothy walked in with a coffee thermos and a tin of the shortbread cookies she makes every Christmas, the ones with the powdered sugar that gets everywhere. She set them on the vanity, poured coffee into the lid for me without asking, and then just sat down in the chair by the window like she'd always been there. She looked at me in the mirror for a long moment. Then she said, "Your grandfather would have been standing right where I'm sitting if he were here, so I am." I put my grandmother's pearl earrings in, the ones from Dorothy's jewelry box, the ones she'd worn at her own brother's wedding in 1987, and I didn't say anything for a while. I didn't need to. For the first time in months, I felt like someone was in my corner who had always been there and always would be. Dorothy walked me down the aisle that afternoon. She held my arm like she'd done it 1,000 times. September 28th, 2025, 13 days before the wedding. My father called at 7:15 in the evening. I almost didn't answer. Harry nodded from across the kitchen. "Take it." My father's voice was composed in the way of someone who has made a decision and rehearsed how to deliver it. He said they'd discussed it as a family. They would attend the wedding. He wanted me to know that. But he also wanted me to understand some things going in. They would not be smiling in photos. They would not pretend the situation was resolved. They would be present as an act of duty to family, not celebration. He said, "We'll be there because family shows up. But we won't pretend you didn't choose yourself over your sister's future. And Claire," he paused, "we won't be contributing financially. Consider it a consequence." I said, "Okay." That was the whole call, less than 4 minutes. I said, "Okay," and I hung up, and Harry looked at me and I said, "They're coming." He said, "Good." After that, I stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped explaining myself. When my mother sent a message asking about the seating chart, I responded with 2 words: "Patricia handles it." When Anne posted from Paris, the hotel lobby, the dinner table, a story from what appeared to be a rooftop overlooking the Seine, I watched it once and put my phone face down. My parents liked the post within minutes of each going up. My father commented on a video of Anne at the brand dinner. He wrote, "This is what we worked for, sweetheart. So proud." They had no idea what was coming. On October 3rd, Harry found one more thing. He called me into the living room at 11 at night, another transfer on the screen. September 22nd, 2025, one day after Paris Fashion Week ended, amount $18,400, source my father's personal account at First Niagara, memo, AM extended stay plus Milan excursion package. After telling me they had no money to contribute to my wedding, after positioning themselves as making sacrifices to show up out of duty, they'd wired $18,400 to extend Anne's European trip for another 11 days through Milan. I laughed. It came out strange, almost like something breaking. Harry put his arm around me and said, "Tomorrow we finish the presentation." October 11th, 2025. I woke up at 6:20 a.m. in the Wyndham Manor bridal suite. The Hudson Valley was doing what it does in October. Mist over the hills, the trees turned full amber and red, the kind of morning that looks like it was designed for exactly this. I lay still for a few minutes with my eyes open, listening to the quiet. The ceremony was at 4, the reception at 7, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, my parents would arrive and do whatever they were going to do. By noon, the venue was transforming. Patricia's team had been there since 7. String lights across the pavilion ceiling, white chairs in rows, late-season dahlias in cream and rust arranged on every surface. I stood in the doorway of the pavilion for a moment before going back inside. At 2:15 p.m., Anne posted an Instagram story, a video of herself at what appeared to be a hotel balcony in Milan, coffee in hand, captioned, "Sometimes you have to choose you. No regrets." She tagged 3 European brands. She did not mention my wedding. Renata saw my face. She took my phone and put it in her bag. "You're done looking at that," she said. At 3:30 p.m., guests began arriving at the pavilion. 168 people had confirmed. I watched from the window. My parents arrived at 3:47 p.m. I saw my father's car in the lot. I watched them walk across the gravel, my mother in a navy dress, my father in his dark suit, both of them moving with the particular stiffness of people performing reluctant duty. They did not look around for me. They went directly to seats in the back row. The 2 chairs in the front row with their name cards stayed empty. Dorothy appeared at the bridal suite door at 3:50 p.m. She straightened my veil, checked the pearl earrings, and looked at me for a long moment. "Ready?" she asked. "Let's go," I said. At 4:02 p.m., Dorothy and I walked into the pavilion. I kept my eyes on Harry. He was standing at the altar in a charcoal suit with a cream pocket square, and when he saw me, he pressed his lips together and blinked twice, which is what Harry does when he's trying not to cry. I smiled at him the whole way down. Reverend Allison opened the ceremony. The reading, a prayer, vows. Harry held both my hands and looked at me without looking away once. And when he got to the end, he went slightly off script. He said, "Claire, you are the steadiest and the bravest person I've ever known. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you feel that." Then came the moment. Reverend Allison looked out at the pavilion and said the words that are always said. "If anyone has objections to this union, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." 1 second. 2. Movement. Back row. My father stood up. The sound that went through that pavilion was not quite a gasp. It was more like a collective intake, 168 people going still at exactly the same moment. My father's voice filled the space completely. He said my name, then he said that he and my mother were leaving, that I had made my choice and I needed to live with it, that he hoped someday I'd understand what family really meant. My mother stood beside him, crying. Not quietly, the theatrical crying I recognized from childhood, the kind that's as much performance as feeling. They walked down the center aisle together, my father's hands on my mother's back, my mother's heels on the stone. 73 people on what should have been my family's side of the pavilion sat completely frozen. The silence lasted 41 seconds. I counted because I had nothing else to do with my hands. Dorothy, still holding my arm, leaned close. "Keep your eyes on Harry," she said. I looked at Harry. He hadn't looked away once. I turned to Reverend Allison. "Please continue," I said. My voice was completely steady. I want to remember that. In 41 seconds of silence, in front of 168 people, my voice did not break. Reverend Allison cleared her throat. She said, "Love is patient. Love is kind." We exchanged rings. We were pronounced married. We kissed and the pavilion erupted and we walked back down the aisle and I did not look at the back row because there was no one worth looking at. Cocktail hour was on the terrace. The sun was going down over the hills, turning everything gold. People ate, people drank, people found me and Harry and pressed our hands and said they were so sorry, that they couldn't believe it, that we looked beautiful. I said the same thing to everyone who asked about my parents. I said, they made their choice. Harry circulated through the crowd, calm, composed, checking his watch every so often. I knew what he was waiting for. At 7 p.m., the doors to the ballroom opened. The DJ announced us. We danced to a song Harry had picked, Van Morrison, Into the Mystic. And for 3 minutes and 40 seconds, with my head on his shoulder and his hand on my back, it felt almost like what it was supposed to feel like. Almost. At table 1, front left, 2 empty chairs. Name cards still in place. Everyone saw them. Nobody touched them. Dinner was served at 7:30. At 8:15, the best man gave his toast. At 8:34, Renata gave hers. Then the DJ said there was a final message from the groom. Harris stood up. He took the microphone. He looked at me once. I nodded. He faced the room. There were 168 people in that ballroom. It was very quiet. Harry said thank you for being here. He said he was not usually one for speeches, but that something had happened. Something was still happening, actually, that he couldn't ignore. And he didn't think they should either. He pressed a button on his laptop. The projection screen lit up. White text on black. 4 words. What happened to Grandpa? A photograph on the next slide. Black and white, 1963. My grandfather Walter in front of the Lake George house, younger than I'd ever seen him, squinting into the sun with his hand raised like he was shielding his eyes. The dock, the porch, the white clapboard siding. Harry's voice was very even. He said this was where the story started. He said my grandfather had loved that house for 60 years and had made sure it stayed in the family when he passed. Click. The next slide showed a page from the will. The relevant clause was highlighted in yellow. Harry read it aloud slowly, word by word. The Lake George property, assessed at $310,000, to be transferred in full to her granddaughter, Claire Elizabeth Madsen, as her sole and separate property. He paused. "That's Claire," he said, "not her sister. Claire." The room was very still. He said my parents had been named co-executors of the estate, that the property was supposed to transfer to me within 18 months of probate, that I had trusted them to handle it. Click. A county property record. The Lake George address. Listing date, August 3rd, 2025. Listed for sale. Active. Someone at a middle table said, "Oh my God," quietly. Click. A bank transfer document. August 19th, 2025. Amount, $95,000. Recipient, Ann R. Madsen. Memo, earnest deposit, estate distribution. The sound that moved through the room then was different from the one in the pavilion. It was slower, more like understanding arriving in stages. People looked at each other. A woman at table 6 put her hand over her mouth. Two of Harry's college friends leaned together and whispered. Harry let it sit for 5 seconds. He said, while my parents were calling Claire selfish for not moving her wedding date, they had already sold her grandfather's house and wired $95,000 to her sister, who was not named in the will. Click. Click, click. Anne's Instagram posts, the Paris hotel, the Vogue dinner, the rooftop video from September, the Milan story from this morning. Dates on every post overlapping with the timeline of the property sale. Harry said the family trip to Paris Fashion Week, the trip that required Claire's wedding to be moved, was funded with money from the sale of Claire's inheritance. Click. The September 22nd wire transfer, $18,400, extended stay plus Milan, Frank Madsen's personal account. After, Harry said, after telling Claire they had nothing to contribute to her wedding. My father's older sister Rachel, seated at table 4, hand pressed flat against the tablecloth, said something under her breath I couldn't hear. Her husband put his hand on her arm. Click. The emails to Patricia Cole, all 3 of them, full text on screen. Harry read them aloud. The August 7th email, the August 29th email, the September 12th email. This event should not proceed on this date. I'm asking you as the mother of the bride to help us stop this from happening. Someone said, that's insane. Uncle Martin, my father's brother, 63 years old, a man I'd seen cry exactly once in my life at Grandpa Walter's funeral, stood up from his table. He looked at the projection screen for a long moment. Then he sat back down very slowly, like his legs had stopped working temporarily. Click. Slides 19 through 21. The financial breakdown. Total wedding costs $58,000. Itemized. Venue $19,700. Catering $17,400. Florals $3,800. Dress $3,400. Harry's grandmother's ring reset $2,800. Everything else, paid by Claire and Harry from 5 years of savings. Parents' contribution, $0. Harry's voice was very quiet now, but the microphone carried it perfectly. He said, my in-laws own 2 boutiques in Greenwich that generate approximately $2.1 million in annual revenue. Their net worth is approximately $3.8 million. They contributed nothing to this wedding, but they did move $95,000 of Claire's inheritance into her sister's account, and then they stood up in front of everyone here and walked out. He clicked to the final slide. Black background, white text, 3 sentences. Claire's grandfather wanted her to have something to build a life with. Her parents decided that wasn't their problem. Tonight, it becomes everyone's. Harry set the microphone down on the table. He walked to me and held out his hand. I stood up. He addressed the room one last time. He said, if anyone wants copies of the primary documents for any purpose, legal or otherwise, I have 3 folders here. He placed them on the gift table at the edge of the dance floor. Then he sat down beside me. The silence lasted 8 seconds. Then Dorothy stood up. She started clapping, slow, deliberate, looking directly at the projection screen. Then Rachel stood. Then Martin. Then Harry's parents. Then table by table, one by one, 168 people rose. The ovation lasted 1 minute and 14 seconds. I know because Harry counted. After that, the night moved fast and strange. 11 people left within 20 minutes. Cousins, a few of my parents' friends who'd been invited through family, people who couldn't process what they just witnessed or didn't want to. The folders on the gift table were gone within 40 minutes. Dorothy took one, Rachel took one, Uncle Martin took a third and sat back down and spent the next 20 minutes reading every page. Renata grabbed the microphone for an unplanned toast at 9:30. She said, to Claire, who has more spine than anyone in this room, and to Harry, who proved tonight exactly why she married him. The dance floor didn't empty until midnight. At 11:55 p.m., Harry Harry checked his phone. 6 voicemails, 29 text notifications. He powered it off. Not tonight, he said. Tonight we just got married. We danced the last song alone on the floor. Dorothy sat at a table nearby, shoes off, watching. She was smiling. That image, Dorothy watching us dance, the string lights still lit, the hills dark outside the pavilion windows, is the one I go back to when I need to remember why it was worth it. At 12:47 a.m., after the last guest had filed out, I sat alone for 10 minutes in the empty pavilion while Harry settled things with the DJ. The string lights were still on. The name cards at my parents' table were still in place. Frank Madsen, Lisa Madsen, slightly askew now from people leaning past them during dinner. I didn't move them. I just sat with the quiet. I thought about Grandpa Walter. I thought about a summer when I was 9 years old when he taught me to fish off the Lake George dock, and I caught a small bass and cried when we threw it back. He said, "Claire, the important thing was that you held it for a minute. Some things are just yours for a little while. What you do with the time is what matters." I picked up the 2 name cards from the empty chairs. I folded them once and put them in my clutch. I don't know why. I still have them. Monday morning, October 13th. Harry turned his phone back on over coffee. Among the messages was one from a woman named Catherine Voss, an estate and trust litigation attorney based in Hartford. She'd seen video footage from the reception that had been posted on Instagram by 3 different guests. Short clips, the projection screen visible, Harry's voice audible. The post had been shared extensively overnight. She said she'd reviewed the basic facts as reported and believed there was a strong case for breach of fiduciary duty and conversion of estate assets. She offered a consultation at no charge. We met her Wednesday. She was 57, silver-haired, the kind of attorney who speaks in complete sentences and never raises her voice. She reviewed the documents for 2 hours. When she looked up, she said the case was straightforward. My parents had violated their fiduciary obligation as co-executors by distributing estate assets to a non-beneficiary. The $95,000 transfer to Anne was legally indefensible. I was entitled to full restoration of the property value plus punitive damages. She estimated a settlement figure of $287,000, the assessed property value of $310,000, less an offset for estate administration, plus punitive damages, less legal fees given the strength of the documentation. She said given the public nature of what's already in circulation, they'll want to settle quickly. The case was filed in Fairfield County Superior Court on October 17th. My parents were served on October 21st. Mediation took place November 4th in a neutral office in Stamford. We were in separate rooms the entire time. I never saw my parents. A retired judge moved between rooms for 4 hours. Their attorney was aggressive for the first 90 minutes, then increasingly quiet. Harry sat beside me reading through documents. Catherine sat beside me reading through everything else. At 1:47 p.m., the mediator brought an offer, $287,000, full amount, one condition from their side. No press engagement, no further social media posts about the matter. Catherine looked at me. I looked at Harry. I added one term, written acknowledgement signed by both that they had violated their obligation as executors and that the Lake George property was rightfully mine. 35-minute pause. They agreed. We walked out at 2:30 p.m. into a gray November afternoon, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment with my face tilted up and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Done. The settlement wire arrived November 10th, $287,000. Harry and I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the number on the screen for a long time without saying anything. Then I opened a new browser tab and started looking at houses. In April 2026, Harry and I bought a 3-bedroom house in Westport, Connecticut. Purchase price $440,000. Down payment $88,000. Paid in full from the settlement. We closed on a Friday. Dorothy brought shortbread cookies. We ate them on the empty living room floor. I was 14 weeks pregnant. We haven't spoken to my parents since the mediation. No calls, no messages on either side. I don't know what I'll do if that ever changes. I'm not ready to decide. Anne's Instagram following dropped to 37,000 over the following months. Several of the European brands she'd been in conversation with went quiet after the story spread. Her posts became less frequent. The captions changed, less confident, more careful. She's still posting. I wish her well, genuinely. She isn't the architect of what happened. She was just the excuse. The boutiques on Greenwich Avenue are still open, but Greenwich runs on reputation, and reputation in that town is a slow, quiet, precise thing. The right people stop coming first. The regulars who've shopped there for 15 years find reasons to go somewhere else. My parents' attorney told Catherine during mediation that business had been soft. I don't know what it is now. I don't look. Harry's painting the nursery this weekend. soft yellow. We're doing it ourselves. Brushes, tape on the trim, the whole process. Yesterday, he was on the ladder doing the ceiling and he looked down at me and said, "What should we put in the will for this kid?" I thought about Grandpa Walter. I thought about the Lake George house I'll never sit in again, the dock, the creek at the top of the stairs. I thought about what I would have wanted someone to say to me when I was young. I said, "Tell them the money is theirs to use for whatever makes them feel most like themselves. Not for us, for them." Harry climbed down from the ladder and kissed me. Then he went back to painting. If you're listening to this and someone in your family is using money to control you, using guilt to silence you, using the word selfish to describe your boundaries, document everything. Know your legal rights. Find someone who will stand in your corner. And understand this: not every family is built from blood. Some of the best ones are built from choice. Blood made Frank and Lisa Madsen my relatives, but it never made them my family. That part I built myself.